Alrighty, everybody. Well, I've got 6 o'clock on my computer here, so I'm going to go ahead and get today's session started. Once again, thank you all for joining us tonight for another session of our Trees Forever Tree Keepers course. This is sadly our last session for this season, so we thank you all for coming with us today and learning a little bit about tree pests, diseases, and benefits. Today, we'll be hearing from some fine folks from the Marion office. We've got Ben Vaughn, who is our urban forestry project manager, and Dina Haverick, who is our outreach, volunteer, and community education coordinator. They'll be teaching you a little bit about our topics today. Like I said, this is our last session, so unfortunately, you won't be seeing another invite from me, but you will be getting a recording of tonight's session sent out hopefully later this week in a prompt matter. And I'll be going over at the end of today's presentation some upcoming opportunities for you all to get involved in what we call Tree Keeper Field Days, as well just kind of talk a little bit about what it means to be a tree keeper and where we go from here. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ben Vaughn, who is going to go and talk to us a little bit about tree pests and diseases. Take it away, Ben.
Hello, everybody. Can you see me in the presentation here?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, I'm Ben. I work in Cedar Rapids mainly. I'm the urban forestry project manager there, and I'm also an ISA certified arborist. Very recently, just back in July, and we're going to be going over some urban tree stressors today, and that can be, as we'll see, a large variety of things. So. How do you know if a tree is stressed? There's a few different ways. There's decay, which we'll get into what that looks like. There's dieback, where certain branches, don't leaf out and die off the tree. Water sprouts, which we'll get to. Wilting, which I think everybody can kind of imagine what that looks like. And then early leaf drop and early fall coloration. These are all signs that there's something going wrong with the tree. But any one of these things can have multiple different factors that are causing it. So you really have to know, what's going on in this particular site, what's going on with this particular species of tree. So decay, this left diagram is kind of a explanation of coded or compartmentalization of decay in trees. So trees have four different ways that they can kind of seal off an injury. Um, they can go, like this, they have a back wall, and they can also grow forward. And this is, the cambium, just the really small living layer between that sapwood and the bark. So if there is, say, like a hatchet's thrown into a tree, that wound is going to exist forever, but the tree probably will successfully heal over that, and it'll just be, some wound that's in the sapwood, and then as it continues to grow, it'll move into that hardwood, um, as the tree keeps expanding around it. And then on the right side, we can see if it isn't able to successfully, keep it out of that heartwood with that back wall, then it can, completely destroy the structural integrity of the tree, rot out everything in the middle. Here's a couple more signs of decay. So this is a wound that the tree probably isn't going to successfully heal over. We can see a lot of rotting wood in there, and the damage from the wound is something that it isn't able to compartmentalize, with that system. And then on the right side, we have some chicken of the woods, which are very tasty, but not a great sign for the health of the tree. And it's not so much that the mushrooms are damaging the tree, but they are taking advantage of a wound that exists. And there is rotting heartwood within that tree, which all of the mycelium from these mushrooms is just growing through that, breaking it down more, taking advantage of that. So even if you were to treat for, fungus in this situation, you're not taking away the main problem, which was that the structural integrity of this tree is basically broken because it's not able to compartmentalize um that decay going through it. Dieback, as I briefly explained, this is just when branches in particular will die off. And this can happen as a result of, say, wind damage. Maybe there's a crack somewhere below this dead point. Can also be the tree coping with stress from drought or things like that, where it just has to select branches that it's not going to support anymore, and then that causes dieback. And then also plenty of soil factors, insufficient water, insufficient nutrients, anything like that can lead to the tree experiencing dieback. Early fall color. You'll really notice this with maples if there isn't a lot of rain and you have a really hot fall or start to the fall. Um, and it can also be caused just because the tree is stressed from other factors. And so that's kind of compounded by a dry fall or things like that. If it also has poor soil quality, if it wasn't planted well, if it's not, has other environmental factors, if there's pests going for it or things like that. And then on the right side, we have wilting leaves, which is just when the leaves kind of start to curl up. It's not that they're getting crispy or changing color. But this is usually a sign of over or underwatering or maybe lack of sunlight. Yellow discoloration. So this on the left side, yellow leaves can really be caused by a lot of things. It could be that early fall color, could be problems in the soil. In this case, this is an oak, and it's called chlorosis, usually when oaks have yellow leaves. And that means that the oak is unable to get enough iron to make chlorophyll to make its leaves green. So that can be caused either because there's not iron present in the soil or because the pH is too high, and then that restricts the tree from being able to draw iron out of the soil. And this is pretty common in pin oaks. You'll see a lot of pin oaks that look like that. And so in that case, it's pretty fixable. You can get a iron fertilizer or some other injection or something for the tree so that it recovers, or just making sure it's mulched and nutrients are constantly being added to the soil and you improve the quality a little bit that way. Shedding leaves. River birch, I think, are the tree that comes to mind most when I'm thinking of shedding leaves, and especially during the summertime. It might not even be that close to fall at all, and they'll just decide to start dropping a bunch of leaves. That's them compensating usually for drought or extreme heat. Um, so yeah, just if you see this, making sure that you compensate, make sure the tree stresses less, you give it a good watering. Water spouts, and suckering, which are kind of similar things happening at different parts of the tree. So water spouts happen when a large amount of damage happens somewhere above, the trunk and the branches. And then to compensate, because it lost so much of that production from the leaves, it'll shoot up just a whole bunch of little branches, and all those little branches make leaves. And so it's kind of helping itself in the short term, but the structure of this tree is just ruined by these. So you really would want to go through and thin these out if you wanted to keep the tree, because these aren't going to, mature into anything that's going to be stable or looks nice or anything like that. And then suckering is very common in particular species. So a lot of understory trees like crabapple, um, serviceberry, and then some overstory like honey locust or quaking aspen are all pretty prolific at shooting up little suckers from their base. So these are just, they come from the roots and they are a separate branch basically, or a separate trunk that the tree is trying to make. And that a lot of times is caused by damage or insufficient conditions in the soil, or damage to the canopy. I wouldn't say it's usually caused by drought, but yeah, something's happened to the top half of this tree or in the roots that's causing it to be stressed out and kind of sending out um, second bets, we'll say, like plan Bs, like, well, if this main trunk doesn't work out, we have these suckers and we'll make a new. Um, it'll be a shrub in that case, but yeah. All right, so those were the symptoms of tree stress. So there are also, things that are causing that stress. So we're going to go through some of the main stressors in some broad categories here. First, there's insects and animals. There's also disease. There's natural conditions and weather, and then there's also human-made stressors and infrastructure-related things. And this picture on the right is an example of a human made stressor. So this fence was already here, and then the trees started growing, but they had nowhere else to go from this point, and so they start wrapping around the middle here. And this isn't going to be, a stable tree in the long run. Okay. So a lot of you are probably familiar with the emerald ash borer. It's pretty prolific across Iowa. It came here sometime in the 2010s, I want to say. So pretty recent, but it's already done a ton of damage. Most of the ash trees you see around Cedar Rapids are either dying dead or being treated. And so the treatment for this is an injection, and it has to be done basically biannually or every other year. Other than that, the insects will start, as you see here on the right side, the larva will dig through the cambium of the tree. And once this is going all the way around the trunk, then the tree is no longer able to send up water or nutrients or anything to, support the top half of it. And so they'll just start from the tip of the leaves and eat all the way down the trunk of the tree and kill it usually in just a few years. And they're pretty prolific. They can spread pretty quickly. And so really the best way around this, if you have a really nice ash tree, you can treat it. Although it's pretty expensive. I want to say a couple $100 every treatment at least. Um, or just prepare and don't plant any more ashes. So yeah. Some more signs of emerald ash borer. As I said, it'll start down from the tips of the branches, and then at this point, this tree, everything is dead except for, just the bottom third of this trunk on the right-hand side. And then on the left-hand side, um, it seems like the bark's been peeled away just to check. But yeah, again, it's dead all the way to the bottom, and now it's sending up suckers. And there can also be, or there exists, kind of a remnant ash forest where there's just suckers everywhere because they don't do anything to the roots of the ash tree. So if there is a field of mature ash trees and they were all eaten down by the ash borer, then it'll keep suckering every year, but then it'll keep just getting eaten down by ash borer. And so there will never be any, mature ash trees there, but there's always these remnant ashes all over. This is another sign of emerald ash borer. So if you see, it's called flecking is where the bark is completely removed off. And then if you see these little holes, these are woodpeckers. And the woodpeckers aren't, really damaging the tree, but they are showing you that there's something under the bark that's really damaging the tree. There are kind of exceptions to this, like the sapsucker. Woodpeckers that will just go after maples and stuff like that, and there's nothing you can really do about that, but they don't extensively damage the cambium all the way around like these boring insects. Okay, another one you may have heard of or seen is Japanese beetle. So these are really common in American lindens, birches, um, and a few other, some maple varieties and things like that. They don't usually result in the death of the tree. They'll just defoliate it like this, eat the leaves away. And so it won't kill a tree, especially in 1 year, but if it happens year after year after year, it'll start leading to those other stressor signs. It might start suckering or having dieback or things like that. There are traps people use to catch these, but other than that, it'd be a good idea to just you know, pick a variety. Even if you want a linden, you can pick a silver linden and they don't prefer that as much. And just be aware of the species of trees that these are really after. And you can kind of avoid those if you see a lot of these or know that other plants are getting damaged by these. As they can be pretty bad for garden plants as well. I know they'll go after roses and other things like that. Spongy moth, pretty similar. Again, it's just kind of defoliating. It can be a little more extensive, as you can see in the picture here. It's not one that I'm super familiar with in Iowa, having issues with that. But again, it's just a defoliating insect, so avoiding species if you know it really prefers that. Galls. So these, you've probably seen these before, especially on hackberry, certain oak varieties. And there can be really, really big ones, the size of, a golf ball or bigger. And those are called oak apples also, colloquially. And so all these are is a insect, a lot of time wasp, will lay an egg in the bud of a tr leaf or in the leaf itself. And then that will trigger a chemical process where the leaf gets tricked into making like a little house around it. Which is pretty crazy that the wasp is able to do that, or the other insect. On the right hand side, this is really an what I was talking about with an oak apple caused by wasps, where they're pretty big. But yeah, it's just all leaf structure that the leaf has been tricked into making for the wasp or the other insect. And they aren't super damaging usually to trees, even less so than Japanese beetles or something like that. And yeah, if you really have a problem with it, again, it's kind of species dependent, so you can select based on that. Scales, again, this is an egg that's being laid just on top of the leaf and it sits, so that it doesn't pull off very well. And this again is not a huge stressor, but it can affect how much chlorophyll the plant is getting. If the surface is completely covered, you can start losing leaves and stuff like that. But as long as they're not a defoliating variety of insect when they hatch, it shouldn't be huge problem. So disease, this is a blue spruce fungus called Rhizospora. It can cause some defoliation, you can see, um, especially around the bottom. This can be helped by making sure you remove all the needles that fall, and you can also prune off, branches that are completely dying back or have symptoms or have this little, flecking on the right hand side that you see. Other than that, this can be something that you probably would want to consider using some kind of fungicide to treat, because it's not like, the mushroom situation where it's just taking advantage of damage. This is actively, causing the tree to lose needles and defoliate. So there are sprays and things like that where you can try to eliminate it. Oak blight is another fungus. It's pretty common in Iowa. They have it bad in certain sections of McBride. And white oaks usually fare better. They're able to survive. Red oaks are more likely to die completely from blight. It is a fungus. I don't know if I already told you that. But this can be lessened or prevented by making sure that all the leaves are removed. Um, when it's dropped, and also it can be treated. In addition, if you really want an oak, it might be wise to plant a white oak, just because they're a little more resistant, and um, bur oak is very common across Iowa, which is on the left-hand side here. Oak wilt, pretty similar. Also affects red oaks worse. It's a fungus, so again, you want to make sure you're raking up the leaves, so that it isn't able to stay in there, throughout the winter and then repopulate again. 1,000 cankers. So this is from an insect, a boring insect, and it's in black walnut. So they're not quite as extensive as, say, ash borer, where they're digging those paths all the way through the cambium. They're just digging little holes, and then, and that can cause rot around it. Um, and that can eventually lead to the death of the tree if it's really extensive, or, the tree isn't able to compartmentalize that canker. And then we have tar spot, which is pretty common to see on maples. And this really doesn't have a huge impact generally. It's caused by fungus that are carried on insects, and then they'll carry it between maple trees. It can, decrease how much the tree grows in the long run just because of these spots that are, able to make less energy than the rest of the leaf because they aren't producing that chlorophyll anymore. Um, and they can be lessened the same way as the other fungus diseases, is making sure you get any material, that's been infected with this out during the fall. Cedar apple rust is a pretty interesting one. So this is a disease between um, cedar trees, Eastern red cedars, and then apple and also some serviceberry varieties and other things like this. So on the cedar tree, it isn't very damaging at all. It's just these kind of weird big globs. It is a fungus, but it will spread back and forth between apple trees. And on apple trees, it looks completely different. It's just these little spots, and on the bottom side, it's kind of bumpy. And it's, again, a fungus. But on the apple tree, it can really spread all through the leaves, and really stress the tree out, make it less productive. So there's a few things you can do to prevent this one. Because these are both kind of smaller tree varieties, you can maybe just treat it outright. You can also, on the cedar end, prune off any of these galls that are forming. And then also it's just good to be aware that planting these species really close to each other might not be a good idea, because this cycle can just pop up whenever an insect, brings the fungal spores to either one of these trees, and then they'll just cycle it back and forth to each other. So, okay, there's also damage from environmental conditions. So, very common to see in Iowa, especially if you're in anywhere near woods. Deer damage. So this will happen a lot as the deer are shedding off that velvet. They'll rub against trees, and they'll rub so much that the bark and the cambium are completely removed. So this half of the tree that you see completely rubbed is now no longer able to send up any nutrients or water on that half. So basically the production of the tree's just been cut completely in half. So it's going to grow way less than it would had this not existed. Depending on the areas that we plant in Cedar Rapids, we'll put tree guards on them. Fencing might also be necessary if the tree's small enough that the deer can just eat the leader right off. Um, so yeah, if you know that deer are moving in your area a lot, it's good to be aware of. There's also some tree varieties that this might be a little anecdotal, but that I've noticed deer just never really rub on. Bur oak, for one, has really coarse bark. I've never seen one that's been rubbed off by deer. And then there's other varieties that they really, seem to prefer, and they'll like rubbing on, river birch here, or tulip trees, or some other kind of more smooth barks. They'll just completely ruin the tree. And then there's also rodent damage. So this is by, a rabbit or some other, you know, little rodent of some kind, and they'll eat all around the trunk, the bark off during the winter time. And this again can be prevented with a tree guard. And when I say tree guard, I just mean one of those corrugated tubes that goes around it, or fencing. So wind damage, something that we all, if you're in, from Iowa during derecho, can remember. Um, Wind damage is worse in certain species. So some species, just because of either how hard the wood is or the structure of the tree are really susceptible to wind damage. Also, the location of the tree, if a tree is in just a really exposed area by itself, it's going to take the brunt of that wind. And it will, you can imagine what the effects are. It can cause cracking in branches, removal of whole branches, removal of whole trees. Soil conditions, I've mentioned quite a few times, but some specific, things would be minerals like iron, essential fertilizers like nitrogen, potassium, um, as well as phosphorus. And then also, has the soil been disturbed? Has it been regraded? Is it compacted? Is there still existing roots and mycelium, which is fungal roots growing in that? Um, and yeah, all types of things can be included in soil conditions. There's also salt damage or salt spray damage will look like this, just curling of leaves. And salt drought can look pretty similar to that as well. Certain varieties really, really don't like road salt, so we avoid planting those in our public right of ways in Cedar Rapids for, the trees we're contracted for. And then also on the other end, there's flooding. And you can pick trees that are resistant to either one of these or maybe both, but always, a tree will kind of prefer one over the other. And flooding can cause a lot of issues, even if the roots are, just submerged for a short amount of time. As soon as they're starved off from oxygen and, completely covered in water, they're going to start rotting and dying and withering away. So flooding can just cause huge fields of trees to die because those roots will suffocate underground. Drought, a lot of times you'll see instead of that spotty damage caused by insects, it'll just start from the ends of the leaves and they'll just start curling up and dying. Um, Overwatering can lead to issues as well. So this is kind of a potted plant example, but this exists, in container trees as well as trees that have poor drainage. So on the right side, you can see those really dark colored roots. All those are roots that grew at some point, but then they just got too submerged in water, lost oxygen, and died. So if a tree sits in water too long, this is a good example of what happens compared to the left side, where it, had the proper amount of drainage and water, um, and the roots all are still alive there. So infrastructure can have a huge impact on trees. You can see here before and after development. So aside from just the straight up removal of trees, which is going to happen, there's some side impacts that you maybe wouldn't consider. And that trees now are more exposed. There's also a lot of compaction around the existing trees from all that construction and equipment moving over it. Also, the soil's been disturbed, so it probably trees have less access to nutrients that way, and it probably holds water less well. So all of these neighboring trees beside this are in a lot worse shape now, and that's something you have to consider, and that they might need a little extra care to make sure they live long. I've talked about this compaction. This is just a clear example of it happening. It looks like bald cypress in the middle. Probably isn't going to be too happy in the long run. With all of the root zone around it just being super packed down, the water is now just going to really run off that, take a long time to soak in. And the roots now are pretty limited in their, access to oxygen and everything like that. The soil's so packed down. This is a good example of topsoil disturbance. So say somewhere's been tilled up for a long time or has been, fully developed. So you can really see how much less air pockets there is on the right side because it's just all of that, structure from mycelium and the roots of plants and everything like that has been completely removed. And that's really where the bulk of the roots will grow, is in that top 6 inches of soil, even for trees. Um, so huge impact on growing things there. This is an example of exposure like I was talking about. So everything around this tree has been removed. So not only are there compaction and all the soil stuff we talked about, but also this has a huge chance of wind just taking it down because there's no cover anywhere around it now. So it's going to take the full speed of high winds. And this right-hand side is an example of a limited root zone where the cement's gone all the way up to the base. So you're now covering the root flare for one. And also there's just not a lot of places where it can get water or, anything that it needs. So I'm surprised it's still growing and breaking the cement. But I imagine it'd be doing a lot better if all this didn't exist around it. There's also trunk damage caused, either by weed whackers on the left or by, a sidewalk being put in or other projects. So this left-hand side, pretty similar to deer rub. None of the nutrients from the roots are going to be able to go up this half of the trunk anymore. And on the right-hand side, this tree's structure is really just pretty destroyed because there's no support now on this side of the tree. And I'd have to see the rest of it, but it seems probably dangerous being right next to the road. Protecting existing structures can also have an impact on trees. So making sure that you plant one that isn't going to grow into the power line is probably the best option here, rather than, destroying the whole middle or left of this tree here. And then taking in mind existing trees and spacing them out properly, making sure that if you're planting small trees that they're going to be able to comfortably grow into big trees, and that you're not planting, competing species right, super close to each other, can all have a big impact. Here's some permeable pavers. So this is an example of ways cities that are, trying to create a better root zone for trees to grow in the urban environment. And that's all I've got for you.
All right, awesome. Great job, Ben. I'm
Thank
going
you.
to put a quiz up here real quick, and as we do that, we'll talk over some of the questions that have popped up over the chat. So first and foremost, we have a question on, are there any tips on when and how to cut suckers?
So the best time to prune pretty much anything, and looking at this, I think I didn't go over maybe the first question, but everything else should make sense to you guys.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, you're good. Do you have any tips on when and how to cut suckers?
Oh yeah, so really early spring or late winter before anything is active are the best times. And this is because, and I'm talking probably February or March. So this is right before the tree starts to grow, but also right before any insects or any other pests are active. So the tree can just immediately start recovering and, covering up that wound from the sucker being removed. Um, and that's, but really any through the winter is pretty good. Yeah.
Totally. Question here from Gene. Gene has a maple tree that was damaged from the derecho with a large branch that was stripped from the tree. The tree is healing, but still has a very large wound on the main trunk, but is otherwise feeling in. Do you have any sort of preliminary recommendations for that tree?
Yeah, you kind of have to just give it time and just provide it the best circumstance to recover. So making sure that it's mulched well, watered and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend using spray or anything like that. Because the spray can actually, while it seals up the wound, it also prevents it from being covered more by the tree because now the tree is not able to grow through that sealant as well. So that wound is just going to exist as a huge wound forever if you don't let the tree deal with it. So,
Yeah. Question here from Gene as well. Referring back to the picture of the tree that had been damaged by a weed whacker, it appears in the picture that the tree is trying to heal. given time, will it cover the wound and develop the bark again?
Yeah, yeah. So that will always, I would say, slow it down significantly, but it might get to the point where instead of slowing it down to like 50% production, it's like back to 75% because it's, like you said, able to seal over that. And again, it won't be perfect like it was before, so it'll be a little worse, but it can completely grow over that. And that's a pretty young tree as well. So.
Yeah. We have another question here from Giada. Does Trees Forever do any lab testing to confirm diseases? If so, where? They heard that ISU can do testing to confirm oak wilt. Just curious if there are other good options for homeowners. And Trees Forever does not do lab testing to confirm diseases, unfortunately. Yeah, I know usually if you're looking for testing on certain diseases, you can contact like your local, if you have arborists in your area, landscaping firms can do that. The DNR sometimes does stuff like that. So there are plenty of options out there. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions here, so let's go over the quiz real quick. So, as Ben said, we didn't quite go over this part, but what shaped exit holes do emerald ash borers leave when they emerge through the bark? And it does look like 74% got the correct answer, which is a D-shaped hole. So maybe where some people got mixed up is that when woodpeckers peck into the bark, they leave an O-shaped hole, but when the ash borers actually try to leave the bark themselves, they tend to leave a D-shaped hole because that's kind of the shape of the insect there. Number two, what causes the growth around a gall? Pretty evenly split, but the correct answer is the tree, or the leaf more specifically, is what causes the growth around the gall. Um, and then number three, when should you prune oaks to avoid oak wilt? Looks like pretty much everybody got the right answer. That's going to be winter when the tree is dormant. That's going to be the best time to prune oaks. Alrighty. Oh, looks like we have another question that popped up in chat. Mike asks, I have what I was told is a red ash tree, which I was told is more resistant to the emerald ash borer. Does have some ash borer damage to it, but I've been treating it with bio advanced granulars every spring. Seems to have stopped the damage. Am I okay with trying to save the tree, or should I remove it to help stop the spread of the emerald ash borer?
Yeah, if you can keep it alive, I absolutely would keep it. I mean, at this point, it's super extensive throughout Iowa, so and your tree probably isn't really spreading if it's not, showing the symptoms of, damage and stuff like that. So I definitely would keep at it.
All right, very cool. Well, thank you again, Ben. Great presentation. We're going to keep things moving right along, and I'm going to turn everything over to Dina, who's going to talk to us a little bit about tree benefits. Take it away, Dina. And Dina, looks like you're still muted.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yep, we're good.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Dina Haverick. I am the Relief Outreach Volunteer and Communication Coordinator. So tonight we're going to be talking about tree benefits. So tree benefits can really be split up into three larger categories: economic, social, and environmental benefits. And we're going to start off tonight by talking about those economic benefits. So trees actually help us save energy. When planted strategically around your home, trees can provide cooling in the summer and insulation in the winter. For example, when deciduous trees are planted south or west of a home, they can dramatically reduce the need for air conditioning by blocking the sun's direct heat. In fact, trees are so good at their job that the cooling impact of a single tree is equivalent to 10 room-sized air conditioners operating 24 hours a day. On the other side, evergreen trees planted to the north of your property can help reduce wind speeds by as much as 50%, resulting in heating savings of about 25% a year. Trees can also help increase the longevity of our public streets. So shade provided by trees significantly reduces the temperature fluctuations experienced by asphalt pavement. Higher temperatures in the summer cause pavement to expand, while cooler temperatures in the winter cause it to contract. And over time, this leads to fatigue cracking. By planting trees, we can reduce the urban heat island effect, slowing down pavement degradation and decreasing the need for resurface and road repairs. In fact, it does such a good job that with 20% of shade on a street, pavement condition improves by 11%, resulting in about 60% savings for resurfacing over 30 years. And last but not least, trees help with economic development. Well-maintained trees and landscaping create visually appealing and welcoming retail environments that people oftentimes associate with higher quality products and more responsive merchants. As a result, some studies have shown that consumers are willing to pay up to 12% more for goods in these areas. More frequent visits and increased spending encourage economic development in areas with good tree canopy. And not only are trees good for businesses, but they are good for homeowners as well. Many studies have shown that mature trees in yards can provide substantial increases in property values. Some estimates range from 10 to 15%. Not only do they provide aesthetic appeal to your home, but they can also provide functional benefits like shade and energy savings, which we talked about a little bit earlier. So that next broad category is social benefits. And these are oftentimes maybe the benefits we don't first think of when we think of trees. So we always like to go over these as a good reminder of why we are planting. This one tends to surprise people the most, but trees are actually a great tool for improving our public safety. By encouraging more people to spend time outdoors, trees increase the number of eyes on the street and help people look after one another. One Chicago study showed that buildings surrounded by trees experienced 48% fewer property crimes and 56% fewer violent crimes than buildings without trees. Additionally, street trees can cause safe driving and fewer deadly crashes overall. The prime factor here is speed. By visually narrowing down roadways, trees cause drivers to proceed more cautiously and contribute to a more relaxing trip, reducing road rage. In addition, mature street trees also form a sturdy barrier between moving vehicles and pedestrians, putting pedestrians at ease as well. Public health, trees are great for not only keeping us safe, but keeping us healthy as well. Many studies have shown that regular exposure to trees prolongs life, aids mental health, reduces asthma, obesity, stress, and heart disease. It improves cognitive performance and basically just kind of makes us happier. People living in places with good tree canopy are more likely to exercise, spend time outdoors, and interact with their community, providing both social and physical health benefits. And last but not least, but trees are a big reason why we help build community and keeping these communities beautiful. People need shared public spaces to come together, and street trees play a vital role in this. They give shape and shelter to public spaces that might otherwise feel rather poorly defined. They help with noise reduction. So trees can act like natural sound barriers. They reduce noise pollution in urban areas and create more peaceful environments for people to enjoy. In addition to that, they also help regulate temperature by providing shade. Trees create cooler streets and outdoor recreation areas to encourage people to spend more time outdoors. And lastly, trees, strategically placed, can naturally screen unsightly views and provide privacy, creating more serene spaces within community. Often, it's in the presence of trees that cause outdoor spaces to be occupied. It helps foster social connections and strengthen community bonds. So again, another great incentive to be planting. And the last, and arguably maybe the most apparent, but the environmental benefits that trees provide. So trees, especially in a city like Cedar Rapids, we've got this big, beautiful river. They're amazing rain collection devices. Their canopies essentially act like umbrellas, slowing down rainfall and reducing its erosive capabilities, while their roots act like massive sponges, sucking up rainfall and further protecting the soil from erosion. Stormwater typically isn't treated either. It mostly flows directly into the watershed, picking up different pollutants like motor oil, tire dust, and other contaminants along the way. And so tree roots actually aid in filtering out these pollutants by trapping them and preventing them from entering storm drains and waterways. So not only is this great from an erosion control standpoint, but also for keeping our watersheds clean and safe. Next, trees can help reduce urban heat islands. Cities are usually built of materials that absorb and radiate the sun's heat, creating these urban heat islands. In these environments, trees have actually been shown to reduce local temperatures by as much as 22 degrees Fahrenheit. They do this through shading and through a process called transpiration, the cooling of air that occurs when moisture evaporates from leaves. And last but not least, carbon sequestration. So during the process of photosynthesis, trees absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through their leaves and convert it into energy that is stored in their roots, trunk, and leaves. This stored carbon remains in the tree as it grows and also contributes to soil carbon storage as organic matter from decaying leaves, branches, and roots decomposes. Trees are so good at their job that, in fact, over its lifetime, they can store up to 22 tons of carbon dioxide in its trunk. And by doing this, by sequestering carbon and other pollutants, trees reduce the overall concentration of greenhouse gases or pollutants in our air, helping to mitigate climate change, extreme weather events, and keeping us healthy. Ooh. Trees are not only good for us, but they are amazing for our wildlife friends as well. In urban, suburban, and agricultural areas, the presence of wildlife is dependent on trees. Trees provide wildlife with crucial food, shelter, and places to raise their young, forming the base of many food webs and supporting biodiversity in ecosystems. So by planting more trees, specifically native ones that are acclimated to our climate and that can feed our wildlife friends, we can help heal the food web that helps sustain us all. And finally, I will leave you with this. Tree benefits grow over time. The larger your tree canopy, the more benefits it provides. So as your trees grow, so do those benefits. We always like to joke the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The next best time is now. So if this is an incentive enough, it should be. But that wraps up my presentation for today. We'll have some time for questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, if you have any questions for Dina, feel free to drop those in the chat. Meanwhile, I will put up our quiz on tree benefits. All right, hopefully you can all see that on your screen now. Oh yeah, looks like we have a question here from Giada. Following the 2020 derecho, did Trees Forever change any part of their tree planting strategy? Essentially like planting more hardwood species or diversifying species more or planting locations?
I would say they took advantage of planting not maples and not ash trees, and that made up a significant portion of Cedar Rapids canopy. And that's probably the biggest major change. And then aside from that, it also, you know, bore out the relief tree list, which is now used by Trees Forever, which, helps kind of focus on more native shade trees. So,
Yeah, and what Ben's referring to there, the relief plan is the plan that was put together to restore the Cedar Rapids tree canopy following the 2020 derecho. Absolutely recommend anyone check that out, regardless of whether you live in Cedar Rapids or not. There's lots of really cool information in there. The relief tree list, as Ben mentioned, was gone over by many arborists and includes a wide variety of trees, mostly native species that are built to just plant trees that are more compatible with what we're working with in Cedar Rapids. Sue asks, are Trees Forever working directly with city planning commissions as they are planning new projects? We do coordinate very closely with the city of Cedar Rapids, especially the Department of Forestry, the Department of Parks, stuff like that. I know originally when the relief plan, which kind of guides all of our actions, was written, it did involve many different steering committees and planning commissions who gave their input and kind of surveyed the attitudes of the residents of Cedar Rapids for what direction they wanted tree planting efforts to go. All information about that process can also be found in the relief plan. All right, looks like we got most people answering the quiz here, so we'll go over the answers real quick. Non-native tree species tend to support wildlife populations better than native species. True or false? Looks like everybody got the correct answer, which is false. You really want native species if you want to support wildlife populations. Number two, trees absorb carbon dioxide through the process of photosynthesis. Looks like most people got the correct answer, which is true. Then third and final is which of the following is considered a social health benefit that trees provide? Looks like it's pretty evenly split between increased property values and elimination of urban heat islands. The answer I've got is eliminate urban heat islands, which is option B. So good job, everybody. Alrighty. Well, Dina, if you want to stop sharing your screen here, that will bring us to the end of our session today. So once again, thank you all for taking the time to spend tonight with us. Real quick before you leave, I just kind of wanted to go over a couple things about what it means to be a tree keeper and what you can do from here. So I'm going to share my screen real here. Give me 1 second. All right, hopefully you can all see my screen here. I've got the Trees Forever website popped up, so I want to walk you guys through. I walked this process towards the beginning, but I just wanted to refresh this. So now that you've completed all 3 sessions of the Tree Keeper course, you are all considered Tree Keepers. Congratulations. So what that means is now you get added to our Tree Keeper email list, and we'll notify you if there are any volunteer opportunities in your area. The best way to find out if there are volunteer opportunities is to go to our events calendar or our volunteer portal. You can filter the calendar based on your location if you go through the volunteer portal. By clicking on one of these areas, you can see what's going on in Iowa, Illinois, and we have this big calendar popped up where you can see everything that's coming up, and all of them are labeled by region. So we could pop over to this volunteer planting in Des Moines. You can see that this one's reserved for a certain type of volunteer from a corporation, but most other plantings will specify if they're available to tree keepers. So I highly recommend you all access this. The other website I wanted to show you guys is the Trees Forever Tree Keeper page. So if you go to treesforever.org/TK resources, if you just fill in your first, last, and email, that will get you into the website, and there you'll be able to see all the different resources from this course. So let's see here. Well, you can explore that at your own pleasure, but all of the PowerPoints from from all these sessions and all of the recordings will be available on that website, so I highly recommend you check that all out. One last thing before we end for the day is we have what's coming up called Tree Keeper Field Days. So these are events intended to give you guys an opportunity to put what you learned in this course into action. So we have a number of upcoming field days coming up. In Des Moines, we've got a tree planting on September 27th. On October 4th, we have a whole bunch of activities. We've got a tree identification walk with Mark Vitosh in Cedar Rapids. Also, on October 4th at about 9 a.m., we have a tree maintenance field day in the Fairfield area. I'm going to drop a thing in here. The best way to learn more about that event is to check out the Facebook page. So check that out. Also, we have some tree plantings in the Cedar Rapids area. So on October 9th and October 21st, we'll be planting with Bruce Moore, and that is open to tree keepers. So that's a great way to come and learn a little bit more about how to actually plant a tree and get your hands in the dirt. Some more upcoming events. We've got another session of the Stewards of the Beautiful Land seminar. That's going to be another online course that you can learn more about invasive species. Also on October 4th, we're having a community tree distribution in Cedar Rapids. We're always looking for volunteers to attend that. So all of this can be found at the Trees Forever events page. Like I said, just if you go to the Get Involved button and the events calendar, you can find all of the upcoming seminars, activities, volunteer plantings, anything you can desire, all through this nifty calendar that our folks set up. All right. Let's see, I'm seeing a question here. Do volunteer opportunities generally provide any degree of required training, or is there a baseline level of skill or knowledge that should be attained before registering? Not at all. All volunteer opportunities are totally open for anyone, regardless of your level of skill or your knowledge about trees. We've tried to teach you as much as we can about what we know about trees, so we are hoping to equip you with that knowledge. But at every planting, we'll usually have some sort of tree planting demonstration, and we'll walk new volunteers through the process, and we'll give you guidance along the way. To that end, I just wanted to talk a little bit before we end for the day about what your role is as a tree keeper. So now that you have completed the Tree Keepers course, like I said, you're added to our email list. So we hope that if you have the time, energy, or willingness to come out and volunteer with us, that we can see you regularly at different planting events, different volunteer events, and we can get to know you a little bit more. Tree Keepers is meant to be a network of volunteers who can help each other and help their communities and their natural environment. So, absolutely, if you see trees in your area that need help, try and see if there are other tree keepers in your area and try and get those watered. Obviously, talk to the city first, but that's what Tree Keepers is for, just providing a network of volunteers that both Trees Forever and anyone else can call upon to help keep our trees alive and flourishing. Like I said in the first session, we're always looking for advocacy. So if you feel like it, you can absolutely talk to your city council, local politicians, local stakeholders about why trees are so good, and take the knowledge you learned from Dina and pass that on to anyone you can see. Because, tree planting and restoring the canopy of Iowa and Illinois and beyond is an all-encompassing task, and we need all the people we can get. So anything you can do to that end would be great. But yeah, like I said, we'd love to see you in person. So feel free to ask us if you're interested in volunteering or check out our website. And as usual, I'll be sending out the recording in the next few days, and I'll add some links and some more information on how you can get more involved. But we're just getting started with our planting season here, and there are plenty of opportunities. So with that said, let's grab our shovels and let's get planting. Thank you all again for joining us for this Tree Keeper session, and I hope you all have a good night. Thank you all very much.